Welcome back to Carneades.org. Today we're going to be continuing with our series. This is not a series on postmodernism. In this video, we're going to look at the question, is feminism postmodern? Now, before turning away from postmodernism completely, we're going to look at the interplay between two positions, feminism and skepticism in the next video, which are often associated with postmodernism. And while there are some common threads in between these positions, there are also important distinctions to be made, which is what we're going to be doing here. So, first, this video's question of is feminism postmodern is more complicated than it may look at first. The simple, though unsatisfying answer is it depends on what you mean by feminism, and it depends on what you mean by postmodernism. So, as we've discussed in our video on feminism, one can distinguish between philosophical feminism, the belief or claim that men and women should be equal but are not, political feminism, described in terms of specific waves of political activism, striving to achieve certain goals, such as women's suffrage, women's equal participation in the workforce, etc. And methodological feminism, using the tools of feminism as a critical technique for a wide variety of disciplines. Check out that video for more in-depth descriptions of these different positions. But for now, it's sufficient to understand that there are these different ways to think of feminism, or rather different definitions of feminism that different individuals may use. So first, let's take a look at the portions of feminism that are clearly not postmodern. Specifically, philosophical and political feminism are generally very modernist. They're built on specific meta-narratives about the oppression of women, and they present a clear ethical goal, gender equality. And while most feminists would argue we've not achieved that goal, they generally see us as able to make progress towards it. This is a deeply modern notion that there's one objective thing that we're striving for, and we can make progress to it. That said, methodological feminism is a different matter. To fully understand this, I'll divide the kind of methodological feminists into two camps. Aesthetic methodological feminists, artists that use feminist tools and feminist ideals to create their art, and critical methodological feminists who use the tools of feminism to do philosophy. Methodological feminists of both stripes are often accurately categorized as postmodern, though not all methodological feminists are necessarily postmodern or vice versa. So let's first take a look at the aesthetic side. So aesthetic feminists were an important part of a number of movements in postmodern art that we have investigated. One of particular note is postmodern performance. Despite acting in many performances going back hundreds of years, women were often denied opportunities to direct or write plays due to the power of gatekeepers, such as producers. This led women to be pioneers in fields like devised performance, where plays are created constructively by groups of actors, challenging modernist hierarchies with singular, all-powerful directors making all of the decisions, and rather creating collective environments where many individuals can contribute, as well as solo performances, where the lines between actor, writer, and director are blurred by fusing them often into one. The challenges of modernist hierarchies and delineations of roles were, according to these theorists, inherently feminist, as they embodied the feminine qualities of collaboration, fluidity, and liminality, in contrast to the traditionally masculine qualities of hierarchy and clear delineation of roles that dominated the world of performance before. These pieces often deal with inherently feminine subject matter, had multiple overlapping storylines with multiple climaxes as opposed to a single arc with a single climax, and provided a variety of perspectives as opposed to a single narrator or the quote-unquote male gaze. The argument here is that feminists, by bringing feminine characteristics into performance and, to use Derrida's words, valorizing the feminine side of that dichotomy, they made art better and made postmodern art. And many of the attributes of postmodern art that distinguish and postmodern performance that distinguish it from modernist performance are made by valorizing these more feminine characteristics, such as the dissolution of strict lines between roles and the destruction of hierarchies in favor of collaborative work and collectives. Not all feminist artists are postmodern, and not all elements of postmodern performance have a basis in the rejection of features that can be identified with masculinity, but there does seem to be something here in terms of the acceptance of pluralist forms of art, one of those pluralist forms being a more feminine style of producing art. One might also argue that some of these features were more features of modernity than masculinity, such as the clear separation of roles of a director and a writer from actors is arguably a comparatively recent phenomenon. But that said, even if the justification for the way that some of these types of art are more feminine falls short, it'd be incomplete to ignore the impact of methodologically feminist artists on the postmodern artistic movements. Now, there are also critical methodological feminists, such as Kristeva, Iringaray, and Circeau. Probably mispronounced those, so apologies. Also featured in postmodern critiques of philosophy. Feminists of this type critiqued the modernist assumptions of a single universal truth as impossible, given the categorically different experience of the world for men and women. For some feminist philosophers, men and women are simply speaking different, incommensurable language games, and attempts to interpret, for example, feminine writings using a masculine language game is inherently doomed to misinterpretation because there are different implicit understandings of the meanings of words, the meanings of phrases within either language game. And so this builds into the postmodernist narrative that there is not one objective interpretation of any text or any language, and also there's not one objective truth about the world because seen through different perspectives, the world looks completely different. And so there's not one way to see the world because the only way we can see the world is through our own perspective. So, there are several things to take away from this discussion. First, the positions of philosophical and political feminism are inherently modernist meta-narratives. But second, methodological feminists made important, substantial contributions to both aesthetic and philosophical postmodernist movements. Though not all methodological feminists were postmodern or would accept that title, nor all postmodernists were methodological feminists. Rather, that some of these methodologies of methodological feminism substantially contributed to postmodernist movements, and there's a lot of interplay between methodologically feminist movements and postmodern movements. So, that said, the answer is more complicated than no, of course not. Feminism isn't postmodern because it's a strong, clear modernist meta-narrative, or, of course, feminism is postmodern because it challenges these underlying hierarchies and dichotomies. What do you think? Does the conception of a single truth or a single universal perspective ignore the inherent differences between the genders and the implicit assumptions or language games that are being played by different genders? Should methodological feminists who critique modernist rationality but hold on to philosophically feminist meta-narratives be considered postmodern? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Watch this video and more here at Carneades.org. We've got one more video in our series on postmodernism. That's going to be postmodernism and skepticism. So stay tuned for that. If you want to see that video and make sure you don't miss other videos, do hit subscribe, hit the notification bell. Watch this video and more here at Carneades.org and stay skeptical, everybody.